Y'all, today we need to talk about the final dungeon of Wallaru. Recently, two different devs have used a certain phrasing that I found very, very pertinent. Rapbeard, one of the devs that works on this game, when talking about healing per pip in his most recent stream, which is linked below, he brought up that they are talking about HPP, but first they wanted to have a meeting about the dungeon that ends Wallaru. Already, another dev that works on this game, mentioned that he wanted to talk about the Wallaru dungeon on KI Live, but he didn't get the chance. Two different people that are talking about Wallaru dungeon. Y'all, I think the fact that they didn't say the final fight of Wallaru means that we're actually gonna get something that's a lot more than just one fight at the end of the upcoming world. I cannot stress how huge this is, right? When you go to the end of Novus, you know what the final dungeon looks like. You go in and only have one fight. There really isn't that much of ceremony to it. And honestly, final dungeons at the end of a world, we haven't really had them in ages. The entirety of the last arc has been basically dungeon free. Like Lemuria, Caramel, they've like all the Arc 3 worlds, Novus, they literally have only ended with a final boss fight. And while, you know, some of them, like the Lemuria final fight, it was actually really, really unique because it was a 1v8 fight for the first time ever. There's still something about a dungeon to end a world that I think a lot of people enjoy. I think anytime that I hear people talking about like their favorite arc in Wizard101, they always say the first arc, and I don't think it's a coincidence that every world other than Wizard City features some sort of final dungeon-like experience or even multiple dungeons. In a world as early as Krokotopia, you actually feel like you're going all the way through this world, not for a final fight, but for an experience. The Temple of Storms features multiple fights and multiple puzzles for you to prove both your strength and wit to be deserving of fighting the most powerful foe in Krokotopia, Krokopatra herself. By the time you get to Marleybone, dungeons became a serious part of the questing experience. You're led on an extremely wild goose chase after an evil genius like Meowiarty, and what do you have to do? You have to go through the ironworks to, like, you know, track down one individual with one piece of information that you need. You even have a dungeon going into some evil mad scientist's lab just to find even more info on Meowiarty. This wild goose chase ends in another dungeon called Big Ben, and yeah, it's a tower, so it's, yeah, pretty repetitive, fight after fight after fight. But even this feels unique because they added some puzzles here and there. They added like some cool side bosses that drop cool stitches. Mushu and Dragonspire do this too. Every single facet of the questing experience in Arc 1 boils down to super iconic dungeons, not just a final fight, a final experience. And keep in mind, y'all, what we learned at the end of Novus is that Wallaru is sizing up to be the end of Arc 4. So for us to get a dungeon at the end would not only be appropriate, it would also solve a lot of issues that I think they've had with the plot up to this point in Arc 4. So far, the end of every world has been an enemy that we didn't expect to fight. And I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it makes me feel a little detached from the plot. You go through all of Caramel thinking you're gonna fight Nana. You don't. You go through Lemuria not knowing who you're gonna fight, but you end up fighting 8 different heroes. In Novus, you end up fighting someone that literally fulfills a trope of it was a butler all along, and he has almost no plot progression until the very end of the world. I think a final dungeon where you can learn about the final enemy just a little bit more if the plot feels this rush would do wonders for the pacing of this game. And also it would give people some sort of teamwork related activity that goes beyond the really big expectation that's been set on them with raids. I think one thing that raids do really well is that they actually encourage a lot of teamwork, right? But the problem is a barrier of entry to get into one of these portals is to make a guild, get a bunch of people that somewhat know what they're doing, get a bunch of people with endgame stats and also energy elixirs. They need max cantrips, they need to know how to fish. As cool as all of that is, you really don't get the full experience of just a 4-person casual dungeon anywhere in Arc 4, barely in Arc 3. I think group dungeons in general have become somewhat corrupted in terms of how most people playing Wiz view it, right? There aren't like the Waterworks or the Tartaruses anymore that, you know, maybe you can like look up how a certain fight works and that's all you really need, and then you just need to find 3 people at your level to do it with. That doesn't exist anymore. The expectations for running a dungeon have become very high, and while raids can be their own thing, I think the fact that they've almost kicked out dungeons in favor of raids is not great. It's not a healthy balance for the game, and I think a dungeon would be super healthy for like the rest of the people that don't want to do raids, that still want some sort of teamwork associated activity in the main quest line. Beyond just the plot, I also think that a dungeon would do something that would solve a major issue with Novus. In a recent video, I talked about how Novus has a really bad pity system, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that they don't have enough bosses that are like, I guess, end game enough in relation to the plot. So what you end up seeing is hard bosses that are locked behind minion fights like the dueling space. You need to farm them for both amulets and ring. Because the final dungeon's only one fight, all of the big drops, the hats, the robes, and the wands are all put into one boss. If you just want a wand or just want a robe, guess what? You got to go through all the other useless drops along the way. I think a dungeon with multiple, you know, challenging fights could also make it so you could, like, you know, divide the drops amongst multiple fights so you could farm the bosses that you want. The big question of the day, in my opinion, and I hope everybody's asking this, is who's gonna be the final boss of Wallaru? And I think the dialogue at the very end of Novus is super appropriate in terms of answering that question. We're left with someone who is basically an infant in terms of the fact that he was born just a couple of worlds ago, but he's dealt with all of the imperfections of humanity and their greed.
Everybody values good. No one agrees on what it is, just that their rivals aren't it. Bad actors pretend to be good to justify acts of evil.
He's clearly fed up with all the people that act poorly in order to justify their own action.
I can't be everything. I can't be part of an everything that seems poised to destroy itself. I am nothing, and the nothing rejects the everything.
That crazy ass ending suggests that we're gonna fight a universal force that is completely antithetical to existence itself. If you guys truly think that a fight like that can be justified as just being a regular fight like at the end of Novus or Caramel or Lemuria, I disagree fully. It better be an epic ass dungeon. I better feel like I'm actually, like, you know, like building myself up to something horrific. I want it to be something that can't be soloed and the drops feel justified. Right now, the Novus final fight, you can solo it if you want. And yes, I get it. It's to appeal to casual players, but if we're really gonna build up the stakes like this, bro, again, it can't just be a final fight. It needs to be something that you can actually, like, truly feel like you're building up to. All in all, I'm mad excited about the fact that we might actually get something super unique for the end of Arc 4, something that a lot of people feel like they don't, like, you know, they're not repeating themselves by farming it. But I'd love to hear y'all's ideas and theories on this, and also, I'd love to hear y'all's opinions on dungeons at the end of main worlds in general. We haven't had them in ages, and do you guys think that this is gonna be, like, a shift in what Wizard101's been doing up to this point? Pretty exciting stuff all around, y'all. I hope you guys enjoyed the theorizing. I look forward to reading y'all's comments on this. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.